Thanksgiving at our loft in downtown Chicago always carried an unspoken agenda. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air, glasses clinked with sparkling cider, and Dad's stories bubbled like a well-poured drink. And just like every year, he steered the conversation toward her, my sister, the family's shining star. "Your sister just bought a stunning penthouse," he announced with pride, as if revealing a secret treasure. "When are you going to catch up, Mia?" Everyone chuckled, except me. I stayed composed. I didn't flinch or look away. I just smiled quietly and said, "I did. I just don't invite anyone who doubts me." The room froze. Forks hovered mid-air. All eyes turned to me. In that moment, everything they thought they knew about me began to change. Thanksgiving in our family feels almost scripted, like a play we've rehearsed for years. The long oak table is set the same way: white linen, crystal glasses, silverware polished to a mirror shine. Mom moves with precision between kitchen and dining room, adjusting a napkin here, smoothing a tablecloth there, smiling. But it's the kind of smile that says, "Keep up the act." Dad takes center stage, charming host with a booming voice and endless stories. But those stories always revolve around one person. My sister Kara, who no longer hides her spotlight. She sweeps into the room like she owns it. Heels clicking, perfectly styled hair, designer coat in tow. And why shouldn't she? The room lights up every time she appears. And me? I'm Mia, the one who brings the drinks, sets up folding chairs, listens more than talks. The one asked, "Still at that job?" or "Did you ever finish that course?" They don't mean to sting, but those aren't really questions. They're placeholders, polite ways to ignore what they don't want to see. Kara gets the big moments: graduations, engagements, new homes. I get nods, smiles, maybe a second slice of pie. I used to pretend it didn't hurt. I told myself I didn't care, that I was taking the high road, staying humble. But deep down, that feeling played like background noise every year, an itch I couldn't scratch. This time, though, something inside me shifted. Not in them, but in me. I hadn't come to prove a point. I wasn't there to show off. I showed up because I finally knew who I was, and just as importantly, who they were. So when Dad raised his glass and announced Kara's new penthouse, it didn't land the way he expected. When he turned to me with that familiar grin and asked, "When are you going to catch up?" That's when everything changed. Kara had always been the star. From school art fairs to college acceptances, she collected praise effortlessly. By 29, she had a husband, a mortgage, and an Instagram feed full of perfectly curated moments. Golden light, flawless smiles, the whole package. Dad called her sharp as a tack. Mom called her their little powerhouse. The rest of the family? They didn't even try to hide their admiration. At gatherings, Kara didn't need to seek attention, it found her. Compliments floated her way. "How's the new marketing job? Did you redecorate again? Wasn't Paris amazing?" She played the room perfectly, laughing modestly, brushing it off like it was nothing. But you could tell she loved it. And me? I was the afterthought. If Kara bought a home, I was still renting. If she got promoted, I was still figuring things out. If she had a bridal shower, I was the one folding napkins. Dad never meant to hurt me. I believe that. But his idea of success was a checklist, and Kara ticked every box. At a barbecue once, he patted her shoulder and said, "This is what building a future looks like." That same week, I landed a major client contract. No one asked. Sometimes, I wondered if I was invisible or if it was just easier for them not to see me. I didn't want the spotlight. I wanted understanding. And Kara, she wasn't the villain. She stood on that pedestal because no one questioned if she deserved to be there. But I stopped playing along because I hadn't just caught up. I'd surpassed everything they ever assumed about me. I'd built something solid, something mine. And I did it all without borrowed filters or Instagram-worthy captions. They didn't know it yet, but they would, soon enough. It wasn't an overnight transformation. No lightning strike moment, no big reveal. Just a slow, steady awakening. at a quiet chain of decisions that built up until one day, I realized I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to matter anymore. It all started the year I skipped Thanksgiving. I told them I had a work deadline and couldn't make it home. But the truth? I just didn't have the energy to sit at that table again and pretend being second best was okay. That night, I stayed in my small Chicago apartment in sweatpants, eating Thai takeout, watching strangers on TV share heartwarming reunions. It should have felt lonely. It didn't. It felt peaceful. That silence, the absence of expectation, gave me space to breathe. And in that calm, I started doing things for me, not for their approval or to keep up with Kara. I took on freelance projects nobody believed in and turned them into steady work. I launched a consulting business and landed my first retainer within 3 months. I quietly moved out of my cramped walk-up and bought a small condo. No fanfare, no posts, no celebrations. It wasn't secrecy. It was mine. With every milestone, I wondered what Dad would say if he knew. Proud? Or acting like he'd expected it all along. But then I'd remember. He never asked. Never once checked in to see how I was doing or offered advice. Not even a simple, "How are you?" When I dropped off their radar for nearly 2 years, it stung at first. Now it just told me everything I needed to know. I didn't fit their success formula. My life wasn't Kara's flashy highlight reel. It was quieter but stronger. Built on my own terms. No applause required. When the invite for this year's Thanksgiving came, I almost said no again. But something inside me said yes. Not to prove anything, not to compete, but to stop shrinking in a room I never should have felt small in. So I went. I wore my favorite burgundy sweater, brought a bottle of Pinot Noir, and walked in like I belonged. Dinner was already underway. The table looked just as I remembered. Candlelight flickering on polished silver, gravy boats steaming, laughter weaving through refilled glasses and familiar stories. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, subscribe and join me as I share how I finally stepped into my own light, because this story is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The roles were all in place. Dad sat at the head of the table, carving the turkey like a general commanding his troops. Mom flitted between dishes, topping off glasses that didn't really need refilling. Kara glowed effortlessly in the seat beside her husband, Trevor, who chuckled just a bit too loudly at Dad's jokes. I took the empty spot at the far end, across from my cousin Abby. She gave me a warm smile and leaned in to whisper, "You look amazing," I mouthed back. "Thanks," folding my napkin on my lap, already bracing for what I knew was coming. It happened just after the pecan pie was served, Dad's favorite. He dabbed his mouth with a napkin, leaned back and, right on cue, raised his voice just enough to draw the room's attention. "Well, your sister's got some big news," he announced, eyes fixed on Kara, his grin teetering on smug. She just closed on a gorgeous new penthouse, 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, granite countertops everywhere. "Whoa, wow," Aunt Carol gushed. "That's incredible," Trevor's mom chimed in. "Kara's always ahead of the game." Dad added, his voice light but pointed as he glanced my way. "Mia, when are you going to catch up, huh?" There it was. I felt every eye snap toward me, some amused, some waiting. Even Kara tilted her head, as if expecting one of my usual vague answers. For a moment, I just looked at Dad. Not with anger, but calm, steady, something that made him shift in his chair before I spoke. I smiled, not bitter, not forced, just steady. "I did," I said evenly, my voice cutting through the room's hum. Dad blinked. "You did?" I reached for my water, took a slow sip, then looked around. "I just don't invite anyone who doubts me." Silence fell, sharp but quiet. Kara's fork hovered midair. Trevor's brow furrowed. Aunt Carol looked puzzled, like she'd missed the punchline. But I didn't explain. For once, I let them sit in it. Let them feel what it's like not to already know my story. It's strange how powerful one sentence can be, not because it's loud, but because it breaks something open. I did. I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly. Kara lowered her fork slowly, lips parted in surprise. Even Mom, who usually stayed out of it, paused mid-pour of sparkling cider. I didn't flinch. I didn't soften it with a smile. I just sat still, letting the moment stretch and breathe. Dad gave a short laugh, one of those tight, dismissive chuckles he uses when someone steps out of line. "Well," he said, waving a hand like brushing away a fly. "Off cryptic." "It's not," I said calmly. "You asked a question. I answered it." He glanced around the table like someone trying to reclaim control of a room that had quietly slipped away. "So what? You bought a house?" His tone made the word house sound exaggerated, like it was some joke I wasn't in on. "I have," I replied, taking a sip of wine. "About a year ago, actually." Mom blinked. "A year? Why didn't you say anything?" "I guess," I said, meeting her gaze. "It never came up." The words landed like a quiet verdict. Not cruel, just true. I saw Kara processing it now, mentally scanning for clues she'd missed. I hadn't posted it online. No announcements, no invites. No welcome mats, no selfies, because it wasn't for them. And that, I think, unsettled them the most. Trevor cleared his throat. "Where is it?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "About 20 minutes from here," I said, turning to butter a roll like it was any other Tuesday. Dad chuckled again, this time more forced. "So, what's the square footage on this mystery house of yours?" I looked him in the eye, steady. "Just over 4,000. The room inhaled in unison. Aunt Carol let out a soft "oh." Kara blinked once. Even Trevor's expression shifted, unsure whether to be impressed or uncomfortable. Dad leaned back. And then, a lot of space for someone on their own. I shrugged. "Maybe. But I paid in full," I said. "No mortgage, every cent." The silence wasn't awkward. It was the room recalibrating everything they thought they knew about me. Dad didn't speak right away. He just stared with that polite, puzzled look, the one people use when deciding whether to laugh something off or dig deeper. Kara had frozen her pie, expression carefully neutral, like she was trying not to blink during a poker hand. "You paid in full?" Dad finally asked. Voice low, skeptical. I nodded. "Every cent. No mortgage." Trevor let out a soft, involuntary wow. Kara shot him a quick glance. "I've been building this for years." I continued, "just not publicly." The tension shifted like a slow-moving fog across the table. Not loud, but thick, hanging in the air and catching in throats. Kara tried to reclaim the conversation. "That's great, Mia," she said, her tone sweet but forced. "Buying a house is a big deal. You didn't want to share that with your family?" I turned to her calmly. "You mean the family that only ever asks how close I am to being like you?" Her smile faltered. "I didn't hide it out of spite," I added. "I just didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore." No raised voice, no bitterness, just clarity. Dad tried again. "So what kind of work are you doing now? I thought you were freelancing." I was. Now I run my own consultancy. I have 6 clients under retainer. Mom finally spoke, breaking the silence. 6? Not disbelief. Something more fragile, like realization. I nodded. "I've been financially independent for a while now." Dad shifted in his chair. "Well, Kara's house is in a fantastic neighborhood, great schools, great investment." Trevor nodded. Kara sat straighter. "Oh, totally," I said lightly, although technically it's not her name on the deed. The room fell silent. Kara's expression cracked. "Excuse me?" "The records show Trevor signed the mortgage," I said. "It's public info, the registry of deeds." Trevor's face flushed. "We're married," he said quickly. "It's our house." "Of course," I said, voice neutral. "But we both know how banks work." Kara's jaw tensed. "Why look that up?" "I didn't," I said. "Someone sent it months ago. Said it was funny how I'm always the one compared, when I'm the only one who doesn't owe a bank anything." Dad raised his hand. Okay, this is getting out of hand. No, I said calmly. It's finally honest. Behind Dad's eyes, I saw doubt for the first time. He wasn't sure who the golden child was. Kara crossed her arms, voice tight. I never asked to be compared. Neither did I nodded. But it happened anyway. Every holiday, every birthday, every backhanded compliment. The room grew so quiet I could hear the hum of the fridge. I built something real, I said. I didn't need an audience to clap. No one moved. Dad looked like he wanted to speak, to reclaim control, but the words wouldn't come. Kara was rigid, hands clenched beneath the table. You know, she said, voice low, for someone who didn't want attention, you sure timed this perfectly. I tilted my head. I didn't time anything. You asked when I'd catch up, I just answered. Trevor shifted uncomfortably. Let's not make this a competition. It's always been a competition, I said gently, just when I wasn't told I was in. That hit hard. Even Mom's eyes flicked toward Kara uncertainly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I worked 12-hour days for nearly 3 years, no vacations, no debt. Built my business client by client, writing proposals and doing my own taxes till 2 a.m. No one asked. Carol blinked. You skipped 2 Thanksgivings in a row, didn't you? Nodded. No one called. No one checked in. You assumed I was drifting, still behind. Kara scoffed quietly. So what? You wanted applause? A parade for doing your job? No, I said. I wanted a family that didn't measure my worth by how closely I mirrored your life. Her face flushed. You praised milestones you could measure, square footage, social media, but not resilience, risk, or quiet growth. Dad finally spoke, voice low, unsure. Why didn't you just tell us? Because it wouldn't have mattered. You decided who I was a long time ago. You put me in a box labeled still trying and never looked inside. That's not fair, he said sharply. It's not about fairness, I said. It's about patterns. I turned to Kara. You're not the villain, but you never used your voice to shift the spotlight. You soaked in all the praise without asking why it was one-sided. Kara stared at me, flickers of guilt and defensiveness. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I replied. You never wondered why I stopped showing up. Mom's eyes were glossy. Mia, I didn't realize. I know, I said gently. That's the problem. Silence followed, heavy, honest, like after a storm. I wasn't on trial anymore. No awkward jokes, no quick subject change, just silence. Dad looked older, unsure, as if his foundation had shifted. I folded my napkin calmly, no anger, no need to prove anything. I think I'll head out, I said quietly. Mom started but didn't finish. I looked at her, done pretending. You always wanted me to come back, but never asked how I was. You wanted updates you could brag about, not the truth. I turned to Kara. We don't have to be close, but it would have meant something if you'd once pulled me aside and asked how I really was. No filters, no audience. Kara didn't speak, but her eyes shimmered. Recognition. And Dad, I saved him for last. You wanted me to catch up, I said, but I was never behind. You just never looked. His shoulders sagged slightly. You're right, he said almost inaudibly. I didn't need more. I slipped on my coat. No one followed. No one called my name. And that, strangely, felt like closure, not because they didn't care, but because they finally understood they didn't own the version of me they created. Outside, the air was crisp, biting, but good. Out here, I wasn't the quiet girl or the disappointment. It was just Mia, the woman who had already arrived. If you've ever felt unseen or underestimated by those closest to you, I see you. Drop a comment below, share your story, your strength. Let's remind each other that quiet resilience matters. Support those who build without applause. Your worth isn't measured by others' expectations, but by your own courage.